Hi, everybody. My name is Jillian Flexner, and I am the founder of and president of Fresh Squeezed Opera. Welcome to the second of our Fresh Squeezed conversations, this time with Brittany J. Green. Before we begin, I wanted to ask for your support in continuing our work and supporting these amazing composers and artists and creating new opera. Please consider donating at the link below. Any amount is super helpful and helps us work toward our mission. And without further ado, please welcome Victoria Benson.
Thank you, Jillian. Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria Benson, and I am the board chair of Fresh Squeezed Opera. Tonight, as Jillian has said, we are speaking with Brittany J. Green. Brittany is a composer, a creative, and an educator from North Carolina, and she's joining us tonight to talk about all of her new work that she's been busy working on, and we're going to see some clips from her. So let's bring on Brittany. Hi.
Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. I am very excited to speak with you. I've been following your work for only maybe like 2 months now, and I'm just so excited for the projects that you're working on and really glad that I'm able to talk about them with you today. So let's
Great.
jump
Thank you.
right in. Yeah, let's jump in. So tell me, how did you discover that you were a composer?
Yeah, so I think I looking back, I think I kind of always knew I was a composer before I realized it. When I think back of my formative years as a musician, I would always embellish and rearrange music that we were playing in band, or if I was practicing at home alone. I always had ideas about, well, what if the music sounded like this instead? And so those kind of thoughts were always kind of floating in my mind. And then I'd say once I got in high school, that's when I really started trying out composition and really discovering that I really enjoyed it.
And what instrument did you play?
I am a clarinetist.
Oh, okay. So you kind of came to it through, I imagine, like recorder first and then clarinet and then sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was younger, I was in choir, and so I sang a lot. Then obviously did recorder, as we're kind of all forced to do. And not too long after recorder, I started clarinet.
Okay. And what instruments do you play now?
Mostly clarinet and saxophone.
Okay. And how do you compose? I mean, are you on your saxophone or clarinet when you're thinking about different melodies or how to, figure out what your composition is going to be, or do you use a different medium?
Yeah, so it kind of depends. It changes. Sometimes I sit at the piano and compose. Sometimes if I have like a certain gesture in my head, I might just sit down with manuscript paper and kind of sketch out ideas, just thinking through theory, and then go back to the piano and listen, or maybe if it's something that is dealing with electronics, I might put it in a digital audio workstation and go listen to it. Lately, I've been doing a lot of improvisation, actually with bass guitar, which
Oh.
I started playing bass guitar in high school and then stopped because I got busy with other things. And so I'm kind of finding my way back to it. And it's exciting to kind of approach an instrument again as a student, sort of, and not as a professional musician. But in the midst of that, also just doing lots of improvisation with that instrument and really kind of getting to know it that way. And so some of that work has actually found its way into some of my current compositions.
So you come at it from a lot of different angles. You say that
Mhm.
whatever you're kind of working on or however whatever form it takes, you kind of pick up whatever instrument seems like the right option to express that idea. So what is it about the guitar that kind of helps you when you're improvising?
Yeah, I think for me, similar to the piano, visualization of it, of the half steps is really interesting. And so certain patterns are a little more visual than maybe, like a woodwind instrument where you're not, necessarily looking at your fingers. And then I also find I feel like I'm a little more free to explore and try things that may or may not work with an instrument I'm not as intimately familiar with. Like, when I'm playing clarinet, I generally know, even if it's something I'm kind of generating on the spot, I know how it's going to sound and how it's going to play out. But with bass guitar or maybe with piano, there's a little bit of uncertainty there because I'm not good enough to at guitar to know all the time, how things are going to turn out, especially if I'm using lots of plugins and pedals. And so in that, I find that sometimes it just doesn't work, but then other times you kind of explore new sound worlds and new material that I wouldn't have, came to on my own if I was just using my own kind of pre-existing knowledge.
Sure. It gives you a little bit more freedom to make different sounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's interesting. I listened to an interview of yours where you said you didn't differentiate that much between sound, noise, and music. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think of it all as kind of one and the same. Um, something that I really love kind of working with is like repeated notes, which I know some people feel like it's like, oh God, that's just like not that interesting, or it's just like noise. But I find that there's so much musicality in like those little kernels of sound that we kind of sometimes disregard as noise, or not interesting enough, whatever that means. So for me, it's all fair game.
Okay. Gosh. Well, let's talk about when you were beginning as a composer. Did you have a mentor when you first began? And if you did, what was that relationship like for you? And does it continue to this day?
Absolutely. So when I was in high school, when I started kind of having an interest in music theory and composition, my band director really supported me in that, and giving me advice and even giving me the opportunity to write some pieces for the band to play. And I think that that mentorship was absolutely fundamental to me then going on and pursuing composition, because it gave me the confidence and kind of nurtured that interest in me, to continue pushing forward. And just in general, I think mentorship is so powerful and valuable. I wouldn't be the composer that I am today without many mentors that I've come across in my studies in undergrad and in my master's, and then now in my doctorate. So yeah, I am a big advocate for mentorship.
And it says on your website that you're also an educator. So, I mean, do you find that you're mentoring young composers as well? And what do you gain from being the mentor instead of the mentee?
Yeah, absolutely. I love working with young students, um, with composition. Well, students of all ages, but something about young students is, they haven't been bogged down with all of the rules, so they're just willing to just go out there and try anything, and I find that very inspiring as a composer. And so a lot of times I find that I draw as much inspiration from them as I hope that I give back to them. So that's something that I think exciting about being a mentor. And then of course, it's exciting to see and to nurture and to help develop, interest in composition in young students, and to know that people are still interested in writing good music.
Oh, yeah. And listening to good music too.
Yeah, absolutely.
um, Now, I want to talk about one of the clips that we're going to share tonight, a piece you wrote called Feel Like This.
Sure.
I think that this is a great segue from our discussion about the difference between noise, music, and sound, and how you do such a great job of interweaving those things together. When I was listening to this piece for the first time, it struck me as kind of more performance art. But I would
Mhm.
love to know, what your inspiration was for this before we play it. If you could just tell us a little bit about this clip.
Sure. So the piece uses a clip from a then 9-year-old at a Charlotte, North Carolina town hall meeting, and she's talking about police brutality. And at a certain point in her speech, she just breaks down and she says, "We are Black people. We shouldn't have to feel like this." And you can hear her voice crack and it sounds like she's like holding back tears. And I found that statement coming from such a young person very powerful. And then also the timbre of her voice and the pitches in her voice, I just found very interesting. And so in this piece, Feel Like This, her voice is what I call phased. And so it's layered on top of each other multiple times, but each time it's layered, it's slightly off in terms of rhythm and speed from the previous time. So you end up with this cacophony of her voice, and then that interacts with white noise and sine waves. And as those two or three elements interact, it starts to shift her voice and crack and distort and break down her voice until her voice itself becomes white noise at the end.
Wow. Well, let's go ahead and play that for our listeners so they can experience that for themselves.
We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black people and we shouldn't have to feel like this. We are black. We are black. Like feel like. We are black people and we are black. We are black. We are black people and we are black. We are black. We are black people and we are black.
Oh, wow. I think that clip is available on your website, I believe. So I highly recommend that our listeners go and check out the full piece. It's very compelling. I think that you said that the recording and the timbre of her voice really inspired you for that piece. When you're writing for voice and you're setting text, what is your relationship to that, especially when the text is written instead of spoken, like it was for Feel Like This?
Yeah, I feel like in some ways it's a little bit of a different approach, but I feel like kind of working in both of those ways kind of can help inform the other. I find that, before I really started engaging with electronic music in that way, particularly pieces that deal with voice, with the spoken voice, when I would set text, I would simply just think about like the text and maybe the melodic material and how that's interacting with the other material in the piece. But I wouldn't think about the timbre, and I wouldn't explore, well, what if this isn't just sung? What if it's whispered, or what if it uses some sort of vocal extended technique, or what if we think about the way that timbre can be used in the voice? And I think maybe that's just a side effect of me being an instrumentalist first, because I think about those things with instruments, but I found that was something I had to start thinking more about in terms of writing for a vocalist.
Do you ever find yourself singing your pieces on your own or working with a singer when you're writing music for the voice?
Yeah, absolutely. Both, but I find that the most enriching experiences I've had has been working with vocalists who are friends or colleagues, even if the piece is not for them. If I just say, hey, I'm sketching this new piece, tell me your thoughts on this, and so they can kind of help provide a lot of like practical information about things that may or may not be idiomatic. Also, a lot of great listening suggestions, um, and also just ways to kind of work with the material. So if something may not fit well in the voice, they may have a suggestion. Well, the way it's written doesn't quite fit well, but I think if you try writing it like this might get the same effect that you're looking for, and kind of fit better in the voice. And that kind of advice is invaluable.
Sure. We found in our conversation with Kate Soper last week that she said something similar. And while she is a singer herself, she found that working with singers when she was writing for the voice was incredibly valuable and offered a lot of insight. So it's nice to see that kind of through line throughout the vocal music that's being written today.
Absolutely.
What draws you to vocal music? I mean, you are an instrumentalist first, so when you feel like something needs to have a singer, a vocalist involved, what is it about a piece that kind of sparks that for you?
Yeah, so I feel like the voice is so visceral. I mean, obviously it's rooted in the physical body, and I feel like it can command your attention in a way that instruments don't always do. Um, I've always been really drawn to poetry. As a child, my mother and I would read lots of poetry, and so I find poetry very, very inspiring.
Mm.
Um, and so that's something I'm always like excited to incorporate in my music. And then I also lately I've been really into just like sentences or phrases that are just like repeated. It's something like it kind of reaches at like a desperation, like a repeated phrase or something. So I find that I incorporate the voice and text into my work a lot. Even work that I'm doing for instrumentalists, I might ask them to whisper or to speak. I actually just finished a flute piece where the flutist speaks through the flute, and whispers through the flute. So I find it interesting to kind of just incorporate the voice in many settings.
I found I did a piece last fall with Fresh Squeezed Opera where the bassoonist was like humming and speaking into his bassoon, and the
Yeah,
pianist too was also singing a little bit, and while he was playing, it was really fun to have what are usually the instrumentalists there getting in on the vocal action with me. It was fun.
yeah, I find that stuff exciting, and it's like a different timbre, and it's a different kind of feeling than what you get with a vocalist. And I think mixing those together is really nice, and it kind of ties into like thinking about like communal singing, with amateurs, and like that feeling of we may not sound, pristine or that good, but there's a joy in us kind of singing together imperfectly.
And an
And so I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, there's like an authenticity to it, and I love that you
Absolutely.
like a community feeling. I think that it's very theatrical as well. You know,
Hmm.
if you're in a concert setting and you see a singer and a pianist and a flautist or any other instrumentalist, you don't expect the instrumentalist to start singing. And I think that adds like this really fun element of kind of surprise and nuance to the performance when it's done well. So it's very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's take another look at one of your pieces for voice. This is Light, and this is, please forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but this is an a cappella piece based on a poem, and it was written for your friend, correct?
It was, yeah. So I wrote the piece for my friend, and the friend is the one who wrote the text. So we kind of wrote for each other in that way.
Oh, that's great. All right, let's take a look at Light. All right, so that one was just straight up a cappella, no instrumentalists, just voices. And what was it about Light that made you want to orchestrate it for only voices?
Yeah, it felt natural to do it that way. It felt like, when I tried to write like a piano part, it just felt like a necessary accompaniment. And I feel like, I really love the sound of just voices center stage, on their own, and kind of having all of the spotlight on them. Obviously, that presents challenges, but I think the end product is always something that I really like.
Well, Fresh Squeezed Opera as an opera company loves that idea as well. So that sounds great for us. I want to talk a little bit about how you write your music and like actually not the process of composing, but actually physically writing it on the page. Um,
Mhm.
I think that I've seen some of your scores and your program notes are, no matter what the piece is, they are very theatrical. There's this great sense of like setting, place, and sort of an overall arching tone and mood that you get just from the program notes, which, I love that. They really give the sense of your intention. So when you write those program notes, are you thinking theatrically? Are you thinking about a live performance? What is it that goes through your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about a live performance. Something that I really love about chamber music, and then in particular, chamber music that uses the voice, is just this intimacy. Whenever I go to a concert and it's just like, a couple instruments and a vocalist, or maybe it's just five vocalists, I feel like it's just me and them in the room, and that's a feeling that I like to recreate in a lot of my pieces. And so I'm thinking about the mood of the text, um, the way the room looks and feels, or the way I want it to be perceived as looking and feeling as audience members are engaging with the work. And so that's something that is really kind of at the heart of my music. And a lot of times, sometimes that's the starting place for the piece, is kind
Okay.
of building out from this idea of a feeling or a mood, and building out from there and writing the music kind of around that.
I mean, I think it's incredible because I've done direction and production for Fresh Foods Opera before, and your scores almost look like design notes, things that we come up with during design meetings for an opera. So it's very exciting, and I want to show the audience, our listeners tonight, kind of an example of that. So let's take a look at Sonatina. While this isn't a vocal piece, it is an example of your unique writing style. And when I say writing, I mean engraving, like actual written music on the page. And they'll be able to see and hear it at the same time. All right, so that was Sonatina for flute, and we'll share the link to the score in our program notes for all of our listeners to take a look at. Let's also listen to the video of Intersections. So that one will show us the score and the improvising vocalist at the same time. And I think that'll also be a great example of what our listeners can expect from some of your music. Just another quick clip. We are nearing the end of our time, unfortunately, which it stinks because there's just so much of your work that I want to talk to you about. But let's just talk briefly about your work with electronics before we
Sure.
wrap up for today. We did get to hear some of that in Feel Like This, and I would love to know about your intro to electronics and how you're working with it these days.
Sure. So I really got interested in electronics after taking an electronic music course when I was working on my master's. And from there, I just really just started diving in, working with just electronic music, also electroacoustic music, also finding ways to work with spoken word and the spoken voice through electronics, which is something that I find really exciting. Whether it be like a fixed media piece, like Feel Like This, where you're kind of manipulating a recording of the voice, or if it's something that uses live processing on the voice in real time in performance, which is kind of where some of the work that I'm working on now is moving in that direction, finding ways to amplify the voice in interesting ways, distort it, put it through delays and reverbs in ways that are really exciting and kind of accentuate certain aspects of the timbre of the voice as well as the text that's being spoken.
It's great. I mean, you've got such theatrical scores and you imagine all of your work in a theatrical way. When are you going to write an opera?
I know it seems like kind of like an obvious direction to move
It
into because
seems that way to
I
me.
do love the theatrics.
Yeah.
Music to me is just as visual, aural. But yeah, as soon as the opportunity presents itself, I'm gonna jump on it.
All right. Well, we'll have to keep that in mind for sure. We are ending nearing the end of our time today, unfortunately. I encourage all of our listeners to go check out Brittany's work at brittanyjgreen.com. The link to Brittany's website will be in our notes. And Brittany, I know you're working on a couple of really cool things. Can you tell us where we can expect to hear some of your music coming up?
Sure. So I'm currently working on a piece with Mind on Fire, which is an ensemble based out in Maryland, and that actually includes the voice, both sung and spoken, and the voice will be live processed. So there'll be some interesting things going on with that. I'm also working on a piece with the Jack Quartet as a part of the Jack Studio Artist Initiative, and that piece actually involves voice. So Jack gets to do lots of interesting whispering gestures while they're playing to kind of tie into some of the gestures that you hear in the strings. And then I'm also working on a installation piece with videographer Kate Alexandrite, which kind of explores human interactions with nature in response to COVID-19. And so if you're in the North Carolina area, be on the lookout for that in the spring/summer of 2021.
That's great. We're also going to include some links to Brittany's work. I know you posted just today that you are doing the Georgia runoff commissioning project.
Yes.
Which is really cool. That means if you donate to the runoff, what is it?
The Senate runoff. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. The Senate runoff in Georgia, and produce your receipt, you could have a composer write something cool for you. And Brittany is one of the composers in that project. So please donate.
Yeah.
Go take a look at that.
Absolutely. Please do.
I also want to shout out the work that you're doing for dementia inclusive in Durham and time slips. I think that the work, that creating art and involving the elderly who suffer from dementia is such a beautiful thing, and a really wonderful thing to do. We all know that music can really connect people to their memories and make them feel calm and present in a world when sometimes their mental health is failing. So please take a look at those initiatives that Brittany is working on too. Brittany, thank you so much for your time today. It was really a pleasure to speak to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here. I enjoyed the conversation.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.